with all of them. Man, this video would take like hours to do that. We could go all the way back and we could look at guys like Nimrod in the Old Testament. We could look at other people that have been part of, or you can see clearly in the Scriptures, that have received some sort of divine illumination. We talked about some of these in these verses here in order to bring down Christ. Remember even Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12. Remember that. That's like Ahithophel, the counselor of Absalom. He was one of David's people. Well, Judas was one of the 12, and he was numbered with them. And he switched sides. How? Because the devil himself entered into him and gave him the inspiration and drew him and led him to do what it was that he did. So remember, the conspiracy are all these principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. And they are working through different elements of society, mankind. Even today we can see it in the media and everything else to bring about the world into a new world order. So let's look at their plan. Number one, and we've already dealt with this in some of our videos, but let's look at it. Number one, the establishment of a new world order. In other words, a world that's not reigned over and governed by Jesus Christ, but a world that's governed by Lucifer. Number two, the establishment or the bringing about of the mingling of the seed of men. Daniel chapter 2, the fourth kingdom, we've talked about that before. The fourth kingdom that comes on planet Earth, it is their goal to mingle themselves with the seed of men, literally change man's DNA. And it's interesting to me that all throughout history you have all these different renderings of like these two coiled snakes coiled together. That is a symbol of DNA. How is it that like the Mayans or the Egyptians or any of these other groups, how is it that they figured out and knew what DNA looked like? They received divine, or let's say sub-divine, demonic illumination as to what DNA was and what it looked like. And I'm going to show you something in this video that even the physicist who discovered the makeup of DNA, well, I'm going to show you something about him in a little bit. So anyway, the enabling of the mingling of the seed of men. And number three, preparing the way for the revealing of the Antichrist in the last days. Now, let's go back to one of Dan Brown's earlier books called The Da Vinci Code. I don't know if you read that, but I read every page. And in the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown introduced to the world a secret society called the Priory of Zion. Now, he got this from a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And these guys did some research back in the 80s, and they discovered what they believed was a secret society called the Priory of Zion. Now, there is some question about whether this Priory of Zion was real and it's always been that way, or was it made up. It was based upon, or the concept that they got in Holy Blood and Holy Grail was based upon a document that was found in the French archives called Dossier Secret. How you like my French? You'll have to pardon my French. But anyway, in other words, the secret documents. And in this secret documents, it had like a poem in it, and it had 13 lines. Well, you know what that number 13 means. Then it had a list of men throughout history, starting with the first Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And this list went on down. I think there was like 24, 25, 26 names in this list of people who were referred to as the Grand Masters of the Priory of Zion. Now, there is some research to indicate that this was all a fabrication, that it was all made up, and that none of this ever existed. Not so fast. Because I started researching the Priory of Zion, and I want you to take a look at their logo. And their logo is very revealing, and it's very interesting, because here we have a fleur-de-lis. Now, if you've seen our video called The Triple Helix, or I discussed this in the last two videos in this set, we talk about the fleur-de-lis and how it's a symbol of something that is mingled with the seed of men, or in other words, three-strand DNA. You also see like two circles that are twined together. This shows the fusion of things that are opposite. So here's my point in this. You know, maybe Pierre Plantard, this guy that planted these secret documents in the French archives, maybe he was a nut. Maybe there was something wrong with him. But it just seems to me that there probably is, a secret society or a secret group that involved at least some, maybe all of the names that we see on the Dossier Secret, the secret documents. And these people were part of, they had a secret. They had a mystery. They knew something. They were being illuminated by familiar spirits, and they were the guardians of a secret that is going to bring about a new world order. Let's start looking at this list now of some of the members of the Priory of Zion, and we're going to find out some interesting things here. Number one, there's a name on the list by the name of Blanche Devereaux. Now, when I saw this, I'm going, there's no way. Blanche Devereaux, let me explain who this is. A lady now. Blanche Devereaux was the queen consort of Philip VI of France. She was an alchemist, and she actually had in some of her castles, she had some of these alchemy laboratories built. And you have to remember what alchemy is. Alchemy is this pseudoscience, and actually a lot of chemistry and a lot of science has come from this. But you had all these people in alchemical labs who supposedly were trying to turn like lead into gold. Well, that's not really what alchemy is all about. Alchemy has everything to do with turning something that is worthless into something that is great. So here lead represents the mortality of man. The fact that man is in a corrupt body is going to die. Alchemy says that through a certain process that lead can be turned into gold. Or in other words, a mortal can be turned into immortality. So here we have a woman who is a high-ranking woman in France. She has a lot of money, a lot of means, and she's building these little laboratories all over France. And she is one, and in fact, she sponsored a guy that we're going to talk about in a minute. She is working toward the goal of finding out the secret of life, or the Philosopher's Stone. That thing that would bring immortality to mankind. Now, we know the Philosopher's Stone as the Antichrist, the lost word, the hidden symbol or the lost symbol that Dan Brown talks about. So anyway, so we do have a woman on the list who is associated in some way with a conspiracy to turn men into gods. But here's the interesting thing, and if you haven't caught this already, I want you to go way, way back in television history in the United States of America. There was, now get this now, remember alchemy, turning lead into gold. There was a TV show called Golden Girls. And that's what it was called. It involved these four older women, and a lot of their sexual exploits were on this TV show. But anyway, involved these four women. Now, one of the women's name was Rose. Now, that might not strike you, but remember the rose is a symbol of secrecy. Anything that is done sub rosa is something that is done in secrecy. A rose is the symbol for the sacred feminine. Dan Brown revealed this in the Da Vinci Code. And then we have another character on the show by the name of Sophia. Well, Sophia is that feminine wisdom that you find in Gnosticism. Sophia has another name. Her name is Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. That's who Sophia is. But then you have a character in this TV show by the name of Blanche Devereaux. Somebody who produced this show, wrote this show, came up with this show, whatever, they knew something. They knew exactly what they were talking about. So here we have a character out of history who, no one's ever heard of by the name of Blanche Devereaux. You would have to study a lot of history to find this gal's name out. She's associated with familiar spirits and trying to turn men into gods, and her name ends up on a TV show. I don't think that's a coincidence. Let's move on. Blanche Devereaux sponsored a guy by the name of Nicholas Flamel. Now, Nicholas Flamel, he came along right about her time. He also was an alchemist. And he amassed this huge library and all these things. Nicholas Flamel was on his search for the Philosopher's Stone, or the elixir of life, or the secret that would turn men into gods. Now, Nicholas Flamel had a dream one night. I want you to get this, okay? He has a dream, and an angel appears before him. Remember familiar spirits. So this angel appears in a dream and gives him a book, or shows him a book. Let's see, where have we heard that before? Joseph Smith. That's right. So an angel shows him and reveals to him a book. Now the book is something called the Book of Abraham the Jew or something like that. But anyway, this book supposedly is written in this mystic cipher language that nobody can figure out. But supposedly Flamel figured out what this book was talking about. And supposedly, according to all the legends, Nicholas Flamel discovered the secret to immortality. And there's all these legends going around Europe. There are legends to say that he's still alive somewhere in Europe. Kind of sounds like Elvis, But anyway, that he's still alive out there somewhere, or was as of 100 years ago or something like that. But here's the interesting thing. Now, Nicholas Flamel, his name shows up on the list of the Grand Masters of the Priory of Zion. And what I'm showing you is that some of these names, if it's fake, why are some of these names showing up in some very, very important things today? And I know a lot of people, when I go around the country and I talk about Nicholas Flamel, and they say, I don't never heard this guy. That's because you're not an 8th grade boy. 7th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids, they all read the same books. They read Harry Potter. And the first Harry Potter book that came out had a character in it by the name of, guess who? Nicholas Flamel. So this Nicholas Flamel guy shows up in a 21st century book, or 20th century. It was written in the 90s. Anyway, and Nicholas Flamel is who he is in history. He's an alchemist, and he has discovered the secret to immortality, and he's going to live where he is now a god or an immortal. And children, now watch this now. Nicholas Flamel has a vision of an angel, a familiar spirit, who inspires him to do all these things. That work of Nicholas Flamel is still being carried on today, and the stones and the foundations of a new Tower of Babel is being built in a generation of young people who, instead of being taught Bible verses in Sunday school, now they're sitting around and they're consuming Harry Potter books in their mind. This is going to set the foundation for the building and the bringing about of a new world order. Incidentally, the very first book that J.K. Rowling wrote on the Harry Potter series, in America it was called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But everywhere else in the world, it was called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Remember, the Philosopher's Stone is a picture of what brings man into godhood, the forbidden fruit, the Antichrist, the lost word of Freemasonry. And I want you to check out some of these engravings that Nicholas Flamel did. Look, Flamel was a scrivener, or sort of a book scribe or a book publisher. And I want you to notice the symbols that he used. It looks like to me that Nicholas Flamel was being inspired to draw the mysteries of life. DNA, the serpent, the cross, which we now know is the X chromosome, where all of our DNA is stored. This guy was receiving visions on how to draw these things, showing us the secret that is going to bring mankind into godhood. Now, here's an interesting addition to all this. There is a pharmaceutical company called Flamel Technologies. Notice their symbol. The two circles sort of fusing together, the fusion of opposites. Flamel Technologies, named after Nicholas Flamel. And you see their association with Baxter and Merck and Pfizer and all GlaxoSmithKline, all these big pharmaceutical companies. I think there's a conspiracy here. But notice their association with this, with Flamel Technologies. Now, Flamel Technologies has what's called a drug delivery system. And I don't understand all this, but one of their drug delivery systems is called the Medusa system. You know who Medusa is, don't you? She was a goddess that had, snakes for hair. She had the hair of a woman, and they were all serpents. That sounds exactly like a description that is similar to what we see in Revelation chapter 9 concerning the demons, the locust demons that come out of the bottomless pit in the last days. Now, one of the next names that we see on this list of the Grand Masters of the Priory of Zion is Sandro Botticelli. Now, I won't spend a lot of time with him. He was an artist sort of around the time of Da Vinci, or he came before Da Vinci, because Da Vinci's name comes after this. But anyway, Botticelli drew an interesting sketch. It was called The Derelict. And it featured Mary Magdalene, who is sitting outside of the Sanhedrin as Christ is being charged. And she's weeping over, in Botticelli's mind, the loss of her husband. If we zoom into this painting,